Welcome to Life Unrestricted.
This is your show if you're sick of living a life controlled by food and exercise rules, and if you're ready to learn how to accept yourself and enjoy the heck out of life. My gig is about body image, femininity, self-worth, and resilience. Come on, let's walk side by side as we slowly step out of restriction misery and unlock our true selves.
Your host, Merritt Boxler, is a former national radio DJ, freelance journalist, speaker, and writer with a passion to make women feel good in their bodies. This is a show brought to you live from Switzerland.
Hey, precious radicals, up for an adventure? I think you won't be disappointed with this one. I have an astonishing woman on the show. Her name is Elena Rossini. She's the maker of the documentary The Illusionists. If you have seen and loved Embrace, which I hope you did see, I heard it's on Netflix now, by the way, and if you loved Embrace, you absolutely have to watch The Illusionists. It's a real eye-opener. But before we get into that, I want to share a great moment with you. You know what happened this week? Another man joined my beloved group of Patreons who are willing to support this show with a financial pledge. And this makes me very, very happy, since I often think about the many guys who are affected by body image struggles as well, yet feel less inclined to speak up about it or feel less inclined to be associated with people who speak up about it because they face so much pressure to conform to society's ideas of masculinity. You know, the whole narrative about having to be strong, having to be powerful, potent, and rational all the time. It hurts them just as much as society's limited categorization of femininity hurts us. So I'm particularly happy to share with you that Bill is now also on board with those people who support my mission to address this topic that is not talked about enough, I believe. Bill, thank you. Thank you for recognizing that this podcast isn't promoting any services, no one is trying to sell anyone anything, and that I'm purposely trying to keep it commercial free. Thank you for seeing that. And thank you for seeing that I basically simply do this because I feel like I have to. It's like some strange force drives me to do this podcast. So you're amazing, Bill. And I think I can say thank you on behalf of all of my listeners. Hey, and if you feel like joining the greats on the support platform Patreon, go and have a look at my page. It's at patreon.com/lifeunrestricted. And Bill, by the way, I'm sure you'll have a chuckle today because this episode is going to be full of some epic rants about how the media misrepresents people and how the advertisement industry preys on our deepest insecurities just to convince us to buy more and more products. My guest, Elena, which, as I said, is a fabulous documentary filmer who went against the grain, who got stronger in the face of being dismissed and underestimated as a female young documentary filmer. And she persisted despite all that just to pursue her passion, namely to take a real close look at how skewed the advertisement industry really is. And she and I, we got really fired up. And let me just tell you, dear radicals, please don't think that just because I'm off on a rant, that I'm judging anyone for their particular choices of buying or using beauty products. I'm not. This is just me going off on something I have an issue with. The way that we are being sold much more stuff than we need, and all based on us feeling not good enough. So whatever you choose to do to feel beautiful, go right ahead. We are all free. And just because I hardly wear any makeup anymore doesn't mean that everyone else has to do that. I just got tired and bored of painting my face every day and of spending so much money on products and creams that usually come with a promise to make wrinkles go away, those bad wrinkles, or the signs of aging to disappear. I just felt fed up with all that. I felt fed up with believing that signs of aging should be anything to hide. Because really, it's just natural. And aside of all that, it's a well-known fact that no cream has ever made wrinkles disappear. So to me, all that those products really did was they kind of made me think that I was worth less if I didn't use them or apply them, and that I probably should keep on buying them. And that's when I stopped buying them, because they made me believe that something was, quote, bad, like wrinkles, or that something was not good enough, like an unmade-up face. And whatever it was, those weren't things that I was born believing. And now that my eyes are more open to what's going on, I can tell you that I certainly don't believe that an unmade-up face is not beautiful enough, or that a made-up face is more beautiful than one that is not made up. Nor do I believe that wrinkles are undesirable, or gray hair. In fact, I don't believe all of that anymore. I believed it as long as I didn't question it, though. But I don't see why gray hair isn't something sexy, really. And I challenge you to just think about it. Whether you come to a different conclusion or not doesn't matter. Everyone is free to believe what they want. I think it's just about opening our minds and thinking about stuff that we might have not previously really given thought to. And I think it's freeing to think about these things. And for the time being, it looks like I'm a bit of a rebel at this stage of my life. And I like it, simply because there's far too much conformity going on out there. Conformity and comparison. And I think another reason why my rants came out the way they did in this episode is the fact that before talking to Elena in preparation for this interview, I was once again paying extra close attention to what I was actually being told or shown in those many ads that hit my brain receptors all day. And I've not done that in a while. And it has sure made the hair on the back of my neck stand up once again. What so often is neatly packaged and comes with a convenient bow of a compelling narrative is, upon closer inspection, often a disgusting attack on our self-esteem. The narrative behind the ad often is this: you'd be worth more if you bought this. You'd be more popular if you had this. Or you'd be more, fuckable if you bought this. So I was already pretty critical, and on top of that, in the week leading up to the interview, I came across a few situations that made my eyes roll so hard that I carried this particular passion straight into the conversation, it seems like. Just for the sake of sharing, here are a few examples of situations I was able to witness. Situation number 1, picture 2 women, about 45 years old, sitting at the table next to me at the coffee place, me sitting there unsuspecting, gazing around, waiting for a friend. So what do I hear? I hear one woman saying to her friend, "You know what? I think I'm going to treat myself to breast implants this year. At least then I can wear a bikini again next summer, and that'd be neat." And her friend says, "Yeah, I thought about that too. I think we gotta help out with gravity, don't we?" I'm not saying anything. I can't even. And then situation number 2, picture a mother accompanied by her little daughter at the grocery store that I go to like 5 times a week. The daughter can't be older than 5 or 6 years old. They cross my path in the refrigerator section, and the sweet girl asks her mom for a fruit juice. And I still cannot believe it, radicals. The woman says to that sweet little girl, "Forget fruit juice. That's a no-go as long as we're on that diet." And situation number 3, I'm sitting on the bus, and in front of me 2 young women, about, 20, 25-year-old. They come in and sit down and start talking. And then one of the girls kind of pinches the other girl in the belly and says, "Whoa, what? You're wearing tights under your pants in these temperatures?" And then the girl who had just been pinched says, "Yeah, well, I have to, otherwise people could see my cellulite in these pants." Is that how far we have gotten, really? So hopefully you understand why I felt so fired up about what's going on in regards to the degree to which we are being brainwashed. by all the messages that rain down on our defenseless subconscious all day. And I think it was especially because I could actually relate to all three situations from a point of, at one stage, believing the very same things. So it felt even worse to see how much of our suffering really is unnecessary, and how much better off we'd be if we could just all stop believing those body negative narratives that make us miserable and companies rich without trying. And by the way, same thing with the way that more and more men are marketed to as the new target group for beauty products. Did you see how cleverly they're trying to appeal to men with the way they are trying to sell them what they sell to us with a different accompanying message? I wish we could spare men from going down the same rabbit hole and make women see that we don't have to buy into all this anymore. But it looks like the beauty, diet, and fitness industries, they know exactly what they're doing. And they're targeting men now, and increasingly children as well, all for the sake of business. And again, I want you all to understand that I'm by no means saying that we can only be really empowered when we don't use any of these products. All I want is for people to understand how advertisement works and what it is built upon. I want people to have knowledge about these things so that with the knowledge, we can make choices from a truly empowered place. And then those truly empowered choices will look different for every one of us. And that's wonderful. We're different people with different values. And I'd love to see all the people being able to live in alignment with their own values and not the ones that they picked up simply by being socialized in our culture. Was this a pre-rant? I guess you could call it that. And I really hope I don't get misunderstood on that one. But you know where I'm coming from with this, radicals. From the heart. And I know you will love my guest today. She's truly wonderful. This week on the Life Unrestricted podcast, I get to talk to, as I said, Elena Rossini. She's based in Como, Italy, and Paris, France. As you heard me say, Elena is a filmmaker, photographer, social entrepreneur, and public speaker. Her latest film project is The Illusionists, a feature-length documentary about the marketing of unattainable beauty ideals around the world. Filming locations included the US, UK, the Netherlands, France, Italy, Lebanon, India, and Japan. The film has been featured in countless news outlets, and I hope it will be talked about for a long time. Elena has been taking The Illusionists on tour, showing it at the biggest companies in Silicon Valley, Apple, Facebook, Google, Twitter, and at dozens of renowned universities in the United States and Europe. Apart from being a filmmaker, Elena is also the founder and editor-in-chief of No Country for Young Women, a website whose aim it is to provide positive role models for young girls. The site features over 100 interviews of women representing 5 continents, 7 decades, and over 24 professions, from NASA engineers to illustrators, architects, filmmakers, and entrepreneurs. In 2014, Rosini co-founded Gender Gap Grader, a platform empowering companies and organizations with innovative tools to measure the gender gap. Elena, as I thought, is going through a really busy time with her movie and hardly gets any rest. So I asked her about her energy resources and how she keeps this crazy schedule she has up.
You know, doing this kind of work and then going out and showing that to people and having discussions with them, it's incredibly energizing. I think there's never been a better time to be an activist. I am just so happy, and I feel very lucky to be able to do this kind of work. Yeah.
And I think the whole world is glad that you exist and that you kind of really kneeled in and did what you did.
And you too, like you're doing incredible things, like with your podcast and like your mission.
Oh, thank you.
So I'm so glad that you asked me to do this.
Oh, thanks. And thanks for coming on today. I know that you had a cold and didn't really feel all that well. So first of all, thank you so much for coming on.
Well, thank you for having me. The list of people that have already participated is so impressive, and it's a lot of people that I really admire. So I feel really grateful to be able to be here talking to you today.
Thank you. It goes both ways. When I saw the film and saw that you had Susie Orbach on and Jean Kilburn, I was like, I'd really love to talk to Susie Orbach and Jean Kilburn as well.
And they are the nicest people in the world.
Are they
in
really?
addition to, yes, absolutely. And they've been helping me out tremendously with the Illusionists. So it's something that I feel like I need to just also tell people. Not only are they doing incredible work, but they're really championing other women's work and helping them out daily, really, in a very generous way.
Yeah, and just for everyone who doesn't know who we're talking about, Susie Orbach was the author of Fat is a
Feminist Issue.
Right, and Jean Kilburn is the one that made the documentary Killing Us Softly, and she's totally knowledgeable with how marketing and all the messages influence our body image and how we're being steered towards hating our bodies. And she's a wonderful woman also, so...
Yes, absolutely.
Worth Googling both of them.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think everybody wants to get to know who this wonderful Elena is. So let's go back. Can you remember a time when you felt really carefree and good in your body as a kid?
Absolutely. And it's something that I actually discuss really often because I feel that childhood has changed so much, especially in the last 15, 20 years. When I was a child in the 1980s, my friends and I, we had no concept of what our bodies looked like. We were really carefree, and it never really came up, like the issue of your appearance or your body, in the same way that, today, doing the kind of work that I do a lot of research, and now the articles and the studies that come out, they show that girls as young as 3 or 4, they are already aware of their body size and preoccupied with, being too big and the need to diet. And I find that to be incredibly disturbing because it wasn't at all the case when I was a child.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in a small town in northern Italy, which is in between Lake Como and Milan.
Oh, beautiful.
I stayed in my hometown until I was 18 years old. So I did all of my studies up through high school, nearby. And then I went to Boston for college. And after college, I began to visit the US when I was 15 years old. I would go every summer and do studies programs to improve my English. And I just fell in love with college campuses in the US and the way that life was structured there for higher education. And it seemed to be very different from Italy or Europe. And I was really drawn to that. So the last year of high school in Italy, I did all the preparation for the final exams, for the Italian ones, and also for American exams, for going to college, SATs and TOEFL and all of that. My mom would drive me to Switzerland, actually, because we couldn't take them near me. And I'm only half an hour away from the Swiss border, so I would actually go there. And yeah, I got grades that were good enough. And I ended up going to university in the US. Then I spent 6 months in London, working as an intern at the Royal Academy of Arts. And then I missed my friends in Boston and the United States. And so I went back for a master's in film studies.
And where do you feel your roots are?
I feel so Italian and very proud to be European. I feel like right now, having spent a long time in Paris as well, It's kind of like a mix of the two, Italian and French.
Right.
But definitely Italian in nature for sure.
Yeah. And then
Yes.
tell us, what was it that got you into the whole field? I mean, you were into filming and
Yes.
what
And
came first? Was that your first passion?
actually, no. So I initially wanted to study journalism at university, but my parents were concerned. They thought that it was a dying type of career. And it really encouraged me to do mass communication instead. So that's what I studied undergraduate. And it's interesting because I essentially studied all the marketing and advertising techniques that I then ended up criticizing in The Illusionists.
Very important. Very important.
Yes.
Because some people don't really know how this whole stuff works. And I've seen so many documentaries, on the nephew of Sigmund Freud, who really made the whole marketing thing toxic. And I didn't know about that. So thank God there's the internet. And I had time and really, dug my heels into this. But if you want to talk about it, please let my audience know what you learned.
Sure. I think that the thing that really inspired me to begin working on The Illusionist, actually, was the fact that when I was about 27, 28 years old, I was at a crossroads in terms of my career. I had been doing some, travel videos as soon as I graduated from my master's. And I also did a lot of other projects on the side that were my personal projects. But I felt, I should probably start getting serious now and, have a more stability in terms of paycheck and all of that. And I thought, for a creative person like me, maybe, I studied mass communication, maybe I can look into advertising. Mm-hmm. And almost the moment that I thought, well, maybe I could do advertising because it pays really well and you can be very creative, I knew in my heart immediately, there's no way I could ever do that, because the whole principle of advertising is based on telling people that they're not okay just as they are, but that they need to buy products in order to feel better or to be successful.
Exactly. The advertisement industry has to create problems that they can then sell us the products to solve them. And they wouldn't be there in the first place.
And I know that you touched upon this in previous episodes, but I think it's worth repeating because it's one of the, the number one message of The Illusionist is happy people are bad consumers. Somebody that is perfectly happy with the way that they are, they're not going to spend money on products, as opposed to somebody who feels anxious. There are studies that show that those people have a tendency to spend more and to go out and to buy things almost as a form of therapy in a way. But I think that in the case of body image, if you have a woman in her 50s or 60s who is perfectly happy about the way that she looks, she doesn't want to change anything, she's not going to make hairdressers earn any money with hair coloring. She's not going to go out and buy makeup products. She's not going to buy clothes every week.
Fake nails
Exactly. So ever since I began to do work on my film, on The Illusionist, in my life, I've really been applying some of the techniques, but in the opposite way, meaning that I now seek out activities that are free as a form of happiness and joy. So,
for example?
It could be, walking in the park. It could be spending time with friends. I'm very conscious of what I do. And if an activity is based around consumption, I ask myself, is this absolutely necessary? Why do I need this?
Yeah. And if you were to teach to someone how they could be more aware of those messages, how would you tell someone who was not previously aware of those, hidden messages, how to approach, let's say, an ad for foot spray?
The thing that I often ask myself is, the person that I see in the ad, okay, I analyze, what do they look like? Are they representative of the people that I see every day in my life or in the street and all around me? And very often that's not the case. There are people that are, impossibly beautiful and always young. Like, you very rarely see people that are older than 40, especially women in advertising. And then for me, like, the biggest standard for any product is, am I buying this because I think that it's going to bring me joy and empowerment? Or am I buying this product out of a sense of insecurity because I feel like I don't match up?
Sometimes that's hard to pull apart, because often I bought stuff because I thought it would really bring me joy or make me happy. As like, once there was a time in my life when I had fake nails, and I thought I was doing that out of joy, but my nails were suffering so bad because they couldn't breathe underneath it. And I was basically destroying the nails that I had just to have fake nails, and then had to keep investing like 2 hours every 3 or 4 weeks to have that. I kind of made life ever more complicated just to groom myself, because everybody told me that nails have to look like this and stuff like that. They have gone so far from our natural being. We don't need all that stuff. And if we're busy all the time, shaving and creams, and then the nails, and then the lashes, and then plucking here, and the body is designed naturally to clean itself and to renew itself. And we have started to interfere so much.
Yeah.
And sometimes we think that brings us happiness. But I mean, there was an insecurity I had about my nails. Of course, why else would I have done fake nails? But I don't have that anymore. And I'm glad I don't have to go back to that studio every 3 weeks and spend a whole lot of money and sit across from someone who does, small talk that kills me for 2 hours to have nails that are mine. I don't know, maybe it's just age. But I realized that I invested so much time and money and my mental energy on enhancing some physical parts that wasn't really necessary, because now that I don't do it, the world is still turning and people are not reacting any differently.
Yeah.
That's what I also meant when I said the foot spray, because there are so much chemicals in there also that why don't we just clean our feet, dry them appropriately, and change our socks every day? There is no need for foot spray. There's no need to put aluminium and whatever on our skin every day. But to go back to advertising, they made us believe that that'll sanitize us, and we don't need sanitizing. Women have been put in this box of, look like prepubescent virgins until they're 80 and be nicely groomed all the time. That's not a feminine, natural woman.
And it's actually one of my regrets, because I didn't have time to discuss kind of like the elephant in the room when you're talking about the issue of beauty, is the ingredients in all of the products that we put on our bodies. From nail polish, you mentioned that before. I know that little girls now, I see toddlers with nail polish, and I'm always horrified by that, because I know that contains so many toxic ingredients and that could potentially lead to cancer. But it's something
as well.
And deodorants, makeup as well, lipstick.
We cover our faces with that every day. And I'm like, I'm so glad I'm not doing this anymore. My skin can breathe. But I wasn't aware of all of that. Really, when I was younger, I didn't leave my house without, kind of making my face up to some extent. And now I really, really don't. And I don't see why I should. And I can use it as a tool when I want to, but it shouldn't play such a role. And how did it come so far that there are so many women that wouldn't leave the house without makeup on and without plucking their eyebrows first and without deodorizing every part of their body first and without, I don't know, doing their hair first. And it becomes
I think it's like just
job.
because like the visual culture has become so intense in the last, like 20, 30 years that if you think about the way that people lived maybe 50 years ago, you wouldn't be bombarded by thousands of images every single day, all around you. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking of billboard ads that you see outside. I see ads in the subway. I see ads when I go online. I mean, even if I have an ad blocker,
it's everywhere.
Most of the articles, if you go to the culture, the arts section, the people that are very prominent in our culture, they fit, again, this like official body that seem to be like the same in every image that you see. And that was not the case. That was not the case 30 years ago or 40 years ago. And one of the books that I've enjoyed the most over the last few months has been Neil Postman's Amusing Ourselves to Death. An incredible book. I am just about to restart reading it because I just loved it so much. Mm-hmm. And in the book, it was really lamenting the way that television had been diluting public discourse, and the fact that show business and the language of television and entertainment had been seeping into the world of politics and the news, where
and no one asks, who do these media companies belong to? How are they funded? And then, as you follow the money, you know what kind of information you're going to get and what kind of ads you're going to get.
Exactly. And Postman wrote that in 1985, and it was mostly accusing television for changing people's behaviors and changing the tone of any type of public discussion. Mm-hmm. Well, my most recurrent thought was, his head would explode if he were to be here today in 2017 and to see how technology companies and how smartphones and tablets and computers, they're making all of us like really behave like addicts almost. For that rush of the new notification and posting photos and just waiting to see how many likes you get and all of that. So I think that there's been a real acceleration. Yeah. Media and technology have really been taking like a really big place in our lives. And I would very much like to take a step back and go back to a more natural way of being. I feel that it's kind of like stripping us of our humanity and our empathy. And I'm very concerned about that.
Yeah, and I think we are hardwired for connection, but we have been trained to look for any sort of approval on the outside. So it becomes this vicious circle. We put on a mask, be it by over-exercising, dieting, hiding behind fake everythings, and then we go out and we encounter other women and we put our programming out also. So when I go out and I look like the model, even though I might have spent 4 hours on looking like that, I might, cause insecurity in another woman that in turn starts a new diet or hides herself behind 3 tons of makeup. You know what I mean? Women have been trained so viciously that they have started attacking each other, basically. If I role model disordered eating, and so many women do, then they might infect so many other people. That's the problem. We should all step forward and be more natural and let go of all those masks so that we can also make other women more comfortable in returning to their selves. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And, whenever I do a screening of my film for a school, the topic that comes up over and over again, especially with high school students, is the fact that they when they look at movie stars, when they look at models, they know that those people have a whole team of hairdressers and makeup artists and stylists that are paid to make them look incredible. They feel like that's like one thing that's not really reality, but they say that they're really affected by the images of their friends that they see on social media, and that they feel incredibly insecure. Say if the girl in their class, she posts images where, you know, she looks absolutely perfect. And of course, they all confess that they all retouch their own images. So they would never post anything that is not carefully airbrushed. But they say that they feel that comparison with people that they know in real life who have this perfect online lives gives them a lot of anxiety and insecurity.
That's the danger of YouTube also. There are so many girls that are presenting a way of, you know, how to get skinny and ripped, and they are presenting their workouts and their sunny selves only, and it's totally unreal. And I'm glad that so many of them are, you know, slowly coming forth and saying this was all fake and I was suffering myself, and I hardly ate at all, and I didn't drink before I went on to the video, and I was heavily made up, and I felt terrible. I didn't get my period. But of course, for someone who isn't aware of that, she looks awesome. And then you check out her videos and then you want to look like her. And you wonder why you feel miserable.
Yeah.
Because she was looking for outside approval. She was needing your like a lot more than you actually needed her message. So the problem is we should really rebuild up our self-esteem from the inside, that we are not feeling the need to make others feel more uncomfortable by presenting a fake self.
Absolutely.
Oh, man. So The Illusionists, you know, it wasn't just a film you decided to do and then you did it and it was done. But it was a really long project. Would you tell us how the whole process started?
Yes. It's funny. I just did a screening last week at the Italian consulate in Paris. And when I introduced the film and I told the women there that it took 8 years to make, they all gasped, like in a really loud way. They were like, like that. Yes, it took 8 years to make.
Why?
I had to go up against so many obstacles. When I initially got the idea for the project, it all started because I was home at my parents' place and I was going through my old textbooks from my gender studies classes in college, and I was trying to find a topic for inspiration for my new film. And I came upon an essay that was called Beauty is the Beast, the psychological effects of the pursuit of the perfect female body. And I read the essay. It was about 7 or 8 pages long, but it was the most eloquent thing that I've ever read.
What was it?
It's hard to summarize like very quickly, but it does an historical overview of all the pressures that women have had to feel, you know, about their bodies and their looks. So it talks about foot binding in China and, you know, dangerous makeup that was used by women, 200 years ago.
Corsets.
Corsets as well. Exactly. And then it basically discusses the double standard and the fact that women have this incredible pressure to be beautiful, that women's value is associated to the way that we look. Whereas for men, it's all about, you know, the intellect and the power, and it's very different. And I was really struck by that essay. I remember that it ended with a sentence saying, imagine all the amazing things that we could do if we stopped obsessing about our bodies. Imagine with that extra free time, what we could do. And I was really inspired by that essay. It really spoke to me. And I thought, well, maybe I could make a movie about this. And my gut feeling, like the first reaction was, if I tackle this topic, I want to do it on a global scale. Because I've seen way too many documentaries that were focused only on Europe or North America, but that were essentially ignoring the rest of the world. And I wanted to be as inclusive as I could possibly be. So talk about women in Africa, talk about women in India and Japan. And it's interesting because initially I thought that I was going to talk about beauty and the oppression, the tyranny of beauty, just from the point of view of women and girls. But the more people that I talked to as I was writing a first script, and the more books that I read, I realized that there's almost a silent epidemic of body dissatisfaction amongst men as well. And I decided that it was imperative that I talk about men and body image in the Illusionists as well. Of course, men do not have the same pressures, but at the same time, they're incredibly vulnerable to those messages. They're the new targets of the beauty industry.
Yeah.
And
now
men,
they get wrinkle cream as well. Who would have thought? Oh, God.
Exactly. It wasn't around 20 years ago.
And that proves that, you know, the capitalistic structure, they needed more customers. So they needed a new target group. And someone came up and said, hey, we somehow need to sell this idea to men in a different way than to women, but we have to make them buy the same product. And they came up with a totally different advertisement idea. You know, they had to represent the cowboy more and the tough guy. And men started to buy all that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, sad.
Yeah. So I decided I need to be inclusive, so address both genders and talk about different countries in the world and compare and contrast advertising messages and also like how people react in different countries and the pressures that they feel that they're under. And a few months in, I had a proposal, you know, for the documentary. And I found a production company that was interested in helping me to get funding for the film. And in France, there's a lot of funding that's available for documentaries. So I initially thought that I was going to do things traditionally. So get a producer, get money from TV, direct the film, and that would be it. But it didn't go as planned. And the number one obstacle was that every time that I went to a meeting at a TV network, the first reaction of the producers was, we don't believe that you can direct this. We don't feel that you have directorial vision. And
they tried to put you back in the box.
The thing is, one meeting, I'd actually won a pitch competition at a network. And they called me back because they were going to see and talk to the finalists of this, you know, pitch competition. And the CEO and CFO of the company, they were sitting there in the meeting, and the first thing that came out of their mouth was, "Oh, Elena, we love the topic of the Illusionists. There's so much potential for marketing. You know, we can do a lot of merchandising, not just the movie, but books and other products. It's fantastic. But before we begin, can we help you find a director for this movie?" And they said réalisateur in French, which means male director. And on every single page of the proposal, there was written and directed by Elena Rossini. But they basically said, yeah, you can write this, but we'll find the director for this movie. And I think that it goes back to the fact that there's so few female directors that are visible in our culture, in our society. And it's been the biggest obstacle that I've had to face. Because to this day, when I introduce myself and when I say that I'm a film director, they give me looks like I just said, I play for the NBA. Mm-hmm. And it might seem like a trivial issue, but when people don't believe based on your exterior, they don't believe that you're doing the profession that you say that you're doing, it causes like a lot of problems. Like I cannot get funding for films. Like it's a lot harder for me to essentially get a film made every step of the way. I am being dismissed as, oh no, you couldn't possibly be doing this. Mm-hmm. And even when outside of the film industry, when I meet people at parties and I introduce myself and they ask me what I do, and I say that I'm a film director, they either ask me, oh, you mean you're a film student? Mm-hmm. Or they say, oh, so you make, what is it, like short films? And I said, no, I make feature films. And they have this like puzzled look on their faces, like that couldn't be possible. And I think it's because, when we think about documentary directors, we think of Michael Moore, Morgan Spurlock. Now, thankfully, there's Ava DuVernay, who, she directed 13th and Selma, Out of Nowhere. She's incredible and she's very visible. I think that we mostly, when we think, what does a film director look like, we mostly think about a man, mm-hmm. and maybe a man who's in his 40s or in his 50s. And so if you get a young woman who says, I'm a film director, there's that look of like, being puzzled, like, couldn't possibly believe this. So basically I ended up doing everything on the movie. The meetings at TV networks weren't going anywhere. And the production company gave me an ultimatum. They said, either we take this deal where, you stay on, you write, and then they find someone, but you'll have to change everything, or we're done. And so I said, okay, we're done. Wow. And I ended up doing a crowdfunding campaign that was successful because I had a background, as a cinematographer and as an editor. I thought I could do this. I could do the filming, I could do the editing, and keep the budget low that way. And that's what happened. So, I basically wasted, quote unquote, about 4 years trying to do things traditionally. And then once I decided to do the crowdfunding and to do things on my own, that took about 3 years. And distribution and figuring out all of that took about a year. So that's why it took 8. Mm-hmm. But it's a really good lesson in resourcefulness and also believing in yourself.
Yeah, don't let other people limit you.
Exactly. And it's almost like, I'm not going to say it's a female thing, but it's more prevalent in women to feel like we might not have the capacity to do something. I think that, I don't know, I was really doubting myself. I thought I couldn't possibly make a movie from start to finish, like all by myself. I'm going to need people for it to be good. And the day that I decided, you know what, I have to start, I have to do this, otherwise it's never going to get done. That's when it all came together.
What made you decide on the countries you wanted to represent in the film?
So the US and the UK, they were very easy choices because most of the experts that talk about body image and advertising, they come from those 2 countries. And I'd read books, again, by Susie Orbach and Jean Kilburn and Harrison Pope. And so I thought, I need to go and I need to see them. And for the UK in particular, I was well aware of the work of Joe Swinson, a politician that started the campaign for body confidence. And I love the fact that in the UK, a lot of politicians have been trying to reframe this as a public health emergency. And I thought that it would be an incredible example of something positive and the power also of activism to get the advertising industry to change things. Because through Joe Swinson's campaign for body confidence, they also did a letter writing campaign to the Advertising Standards Authority. they protested against a few ads that were incredibly airbrushed. And they encouraged people to send letters in protest. And those ads, there were ads by L'Oreal and Maybelline and a lot of major companies. They ended up being pulled, actually, in the UK. And so I always cite that example as something positive and that can encourage people to have their voices heard and to protest, because that actually works. So that was, again, an easy choice. And then I went to Nijmegen in the Netherlands because one of the people that I wanted to interview, she had an art exhibit at a museum in the Netherlands. And I thought that the work that she did was fascinating. She took classical paintings and she retouched them to have the women appear, according to our current beauty standards. So in many of the paintings that she used, the subjects that are super well known, they appear to be, thinner, with perkier breasts. And I thought that it was so provocative.
It hurt my soul when I saw that, all these beautiful paintings with those voluptuous women and the Venus and everything. And the way she presented them, the work was great because it was so stunning to see how far we've come. But it hurts the eye because you go, this is not right.
You know what's funny, Merit? I'm going to probably release this as an extra clip because I didn't have the time in the movie to put this in. But there are a lot of people at the museum that stood in front of the paintings and then they turned around and they said, why is there the same painting twice? We don't understand. They didn't see that there was a difference. We're so conditioned to see things a certain way. But yeah, a lot of people thought that it was the same painting with no difference whatsoever.
Yeah. And then what made you choose France and Lebanon? That one surprised me. And Japan.
Yeah. So France was really interesting for me to discuss the pressure of Black women in France to conform to certain ideals. I had done a little bit of research about companies and individuals that were fighting back against mainstream media and traditional representations of women. And I decided to interview the editor-in-chief of Fascist Black, which is a fashion magazine for women of color in Paris. And she had done a lot of research and she was really addressing the community of women that come from the diaspora. And something that has always struck me as incredibly disturbing and sad was the fact that on certain streets in Paris, there are beauty shops for women of color, and they have names that are incredibly racist, like Supreme White or Perfect White. Oh. And they're beauty shops that sell skin whitening creams and all kinds of beauty treatments.
Yeah, and we get sold the self-tanning lotion and they get sold the skin whitener. So sick.
Exactly. And it goes back to the whole idea of you're not okay just as you are. You need to buy products and you need to spend time and spend money to change your appearance, to go against your real nature.
And potentially hurt your skin. Those skin whiteners with the bleach in it, that's what we do to just look different. It's terrible. Yeah.
It really is.
I'm glad you included that.
Of course. And Lebanon it wasn't actually planned initially. But when I was filming interviews in Boston, I had volunteers that were helping me out. And one of the volunteers, Karen, she was from Lebanon. And she said to me, Elena, you really have to look at Lebanon. It's so interesting. Everybody there is doing plastic surgery. And I'm not just talking about the nose. They start with the nose, men, women, and then they go for a lot of different procedures. And she said, it's almost like as common as going to the dentist. So look into it. And I found in my research that Lebanon was actually the first country in the world where a bank set up loans for people of lower income to enable them to have plastic surgery with a very low interest rate. And I reached out to the bank, to the marketing manager that was in charge of that campaign. And it was definitely one of the most interesting interviews that I've done. He said that when, they had campaigns for, car loans or home loans and all of that, they would usually get 20 to 30 phone calls a day. And when they started the plastic surgery campaign, they would get 300 calls every day by people that wanted to get that loan.
Imagine that. That points to a gigantic body image dissatisfaction right there.
Absolutely.
Oh man, that's terrible. It really shook me to see that women really, they want to look the same, and none of them really looks natural anymore. And like, who are you? Where are you? Where have you gone? It's so sad.
I was looking at music videos and I couldn't almost tell the women apart.
Yeah,
they all looked the same.
And I wasn't aware how much Japanese women suffered. I wasn't aware of that at all. I thought they were all just skinny.
Yeah. So initially, I thought that I was going to Japan only to talk about skin whitening creams, because having like a porcelain white skin free of blemishes and beauty spots is considered to be the ultimate beauty ideal in Japan. Not for an imperialistic reason like in some other countries, but more it's like a long-standing tradition. It's a symbol of youth and refinement and elegance and time spent inside. And I thought, well, I'm only going to talk about this for Japan. But then I began to do research, trying to see which kind of experts I could interview. And I found that eating disorders are really rampant in Japan. And there's like an epidemic of like body dissatisfaction when it comes to body size, that women are very thin naturally. But when they take surveys, they often say that they feel like they're overweight. And so I thought it was really important to talk about that. And I don't want to spoil the surprise if anybody watches The Illusionists in the future, but something that blows everybody's mind is like the part about Japan at the end of the movie, when I talk about future bodies and what technology is now able to do. Group. Well, there's a music group in Japan that's incredibly popular, and in one of their promotional campaigns, there was a new woman that nobody had ever seen before. And the big reveal was that she was actually created by a computer, and it was impossible to tell. Even myself, I feel like I have a trained eye as a film director and as an editor, but the first time that I watched that commercial, I thought that she was a real person. She's singing, she's moving around and dancing, but she was created by a company that does like a lot of like really highly advanced like technology, and they picked features like body features of different members of the band. So the eyes of one, the lips of another, the eyebrows of another, and they created this woman as the perfect woman.
That is so far from being natural as you can possibly get, and that turns into the new ideal. Which basically,
well, especially because she doesn't age and she can be perfect in every way.
Don't you think we will, at one point, people will get sick of all this? Because, authenticity is in everybody's mouth these days. But truly, I think this is the only way. We will be hungry for authentic, non-masked people. We will be hungry for flaws, hungry for scars, hungry for diversity, because maybe it's just me, but I'm getting excessively bored.
Yeah. One of the best bits that came out of The Illusionists, and that I couldn't use it because it was told to me by Susie Orbach when we had already wrapped filming, and I was on the doorsteps of her house, with the camera in my bag. And she said to me, first, advertisers are going to get us all to look the same, and then they're going to get us to all look different, you know, like the next wave of beauty and advertising messages. And I thought that's so true. So I wouldn't be surprised, as you say, if there is backlash against those images, and if at some point in the future there's going to be a return to a more natural way of being. But the way that our capitalist system works, I think that companies need to make money, and they need to convince us to spend our money to support them. And so I think that's never going to go away. But I'm thinking that maybe we can have a decade kind of like the end of the 1960s and the 1970s that are going to be all based on a more natural look. And then I wouldn't be surprised if it goes back to this hyper-perfected look.
Maybe, as everything occurs in cycles. But I really loved the way Susie Orbach, how she showed up in the movie. And that really proves that she is totally walking her walk and, you know, not just talking. The way she spoke about that people in this society almost look at her as if she were a bum, you know, like she doesn't take care of herself, but she really does take care of herself, but she doesn't accommodate those silly standards. She just says, that's me, that's how I look. Yeah. And I think we need more women like that. And, you know, I'm 44 this year, so I might be one of the examples. I just want to be me. I want to age with grace, you know, just, hey, that's me. And we are all aging, and there will always be younger people, and we will all die one day. And we seem to forget that.
Exactly. And something that we also seem to forget and not really talk about, you know, I call the film The Illusionists, and I think that the illusion is all those advertising messages are essentially saying, once you're beautiful or once you improve the way that you look, you're going to be successful, you're going to be happier, and all of that. But actually, even people that are classically and traditionally beautiful, they can be incredibly insecure about their looks. And I remember reading studies that showed that women that were perceived to be really beautiful in their youth, they actually experience a lot of anxiety and depression as they get older, because they've always associated their value to their exterior and their looks. Yeah. Whereas women that did not really do that, and that, you know, self-identify to be average looking, they really don't change, like the way that they feel about their bodies as they get older. So I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, I can confirm that, because I have personal experience with women who were extremely, you know, commercially beautiful, if you want. I don't know how else to put it, but they were very much looking like some beauty ideals out there. And they were all suffering once they were getting older, because when we started talking about it, I opened up and said how envious I was when we were younger, and how jealous I was of them getting all the boys, and how ugly I felt, you know, being the chubby teenager with the basically the foil on her glasses, and, you know, not ever being checked out by boys. And they all told me that they never knew if they were really loved, or if it was just, if they were just trophies. And that once they got older, how desperately they felt the need that, well, I need to hold on to this. This is my only asset. And that they really had to reconfigure that. And that's the problem with an eating disorder maybe as well, that you change your appearance, you get all the outside approval. And from then on, it's basically downhill. You see, it's all fleeting, and you want to hold on to that because you don't have an inner basis of self-worth, and then it gets more and more toxic, and then it spins out of control, and you basically only lose yourself in it, and you will find at the bottom of the pit there's nothing, and there's no one else outside who gives you applause for something when you lost yourself. But this can be a very, very, very long struggle. And if the advertisement industry keeps those messages up, it's even hard to become aware of the trap we keep ourselves trapped in, you know?
And it's interesting because, you know, one of the most memorable screenings that I've ever done is the one that I mentioned before that I did for the advertising agency in New York about 2 weeks ago.
Oh, yeah,
I was really anxious because, well, I sit in the same room, and it was a room full of probably 60 or 70 people from this ad agency. And I was just hearing the sound of the film, all of my experts talking about the advertising industry and manipulation and selling insecurity. And I thought, oh my God.
Pulling the curtain back, right?
Exactly. I thought, especially like the movie ends, like I didn't even think about this, before I got to do the screening, but the film ends with a quote that essentially demolishes the world of advertising. Mm-hmm. It's a quote that says, advertising is the art of selling people something they don't need with the money that they don't have.
To please people they don't like.
Yeah, and I thought, oh my goodness, they're gonna feel like I attacked them, that I'm not being respectful. Like, it's gonna be like a really interesting Q&A. But they could not have been nicer to me. And one of the biggest takeaways that I had, the first question was, now that you have the opportunity to talk to us, to talk to people in advertising, what would you say to us directly? What can we do differently? And I said to them that I truly wish that they could be more inclusive from the points of view of body types, from the point of view of age, not just people that are able-bodied, but like truly inclusive in every sense of the way.
Sizes, bodies, colors.
Exactly. And I said, I can show you, I can make a very persuasive argument that empowerment sells. And if you make your customer feel like they're being represented and they feel more empowered because they think, oh, that person in the ad, they look just like me. That's amazing. I said, you're probably going to get your customers to become your number one ambassadors. And they're going to do a lot of free advertising for you and mention your brand. And there have been cases like, Dove and Aerie and a lot of different brands that have really done things that are inclusive, or they've been very outspoken about the use of airbrushing, and they've gotten women to share a lot of their photos and to be very passionate supporters of their brands.
Yeah, but they're still trying to sell us stuff that we don't need.
I know that they're incredibly problematic.
And Unilever, the mother company that owns Dove, I think on the same day they had an acquisition. Yeah, and they acquired Slim Fast and Ben and Jerry's on the same day, which are two companies that sell the exact opposite, and they make you...
People always laugh when they see that in the Illusionists. I know. One quick thing, though, just to finish the anecdote. So I said, be more inclusive. And their response actually surprised me. They said, we try, but ultimately it's the client that decides. And many of our ideas were shut down by the clients because they'd rather go the traditional way and just keep doing things the same old way.
Why do you think that is? I think that's conditioning as well.
Yeah, it must be. It must be.
Because it can't be that, we want to look at pictures that basically hurt our self-esteem and then we can keep on hurting ourselves, but we keep asking for those impossible pictures. That's weird. So that must be some deep programming.
They must think that sells more than normal-looking people, quote unquote.
Yeah, and we want to keep up the illusion that we can do something to increase our inherent self-worth.
Exactly.
Which says a lot about the lack of self-worth we have inside of ourselves. And so we need to reprogram the whole thing from the inside out, I think. Mm-hmm. Yeah. How do you experience the treatment of women in regards to their bodies when you were in France or Italy or the US? Do you think women are treated differently cross-culturally?
Oh, absolutely. I became like an activist and a feminist when I first arrived in France. I had spent the bulk of my, I'm not going to say adult life, but my most formative years, I was in the United States. And the message that I got when I was in school was, if you work hard and if you're talented, you can do anything that you want to do, that you set your mind to. And, when I finished my studies, I moved to Paris. And I remember that I had the exact opposite experience, that nobody would take me seriously as a film director here. It was a very macho kind of environment. And that's when I began to read a lot of, women's studies and feminist books to get really interested in not just the theory, but doing something against that. It's always been like a trait of mine that if something really bothers me, I'd rather turn that into a project than just like complain with like my friends and loved ones.
I love that about you.
Yeah, it's very cathartic to do it that way, because you kind of feel like you're contributing to change the situation and to improve it. And so honestly, like, I know that it might sound a little bit, I'm not going to say naive, but maybe not very respectful to say the following thing, because I am completely aware of my white privilege. So let's just like put that out there. But I always felt that my body was my biggest liability in my profession, because when people look at me, they don't believe that I can be a film director. Because I look feminine and I look young. I have long hair. And when we see and when we think about film directors, we think of, again, as I said before, like a man in his 40s or 50s with a little bit of a beard. And so like that really got me thinking about, the relationship in between, our bodies and how people perceive us, and the stereotypes and all the limitations that exist in our culture because of our bodies or because of our gender.
And do you think the US is worse in the stereotyping of women or the advertisement content than Europe?
I think it is. In Europe, I think that the messages, the images that I see, they're idealized, but there's a lot more diversity. I love the fact that in France now, you get a lot of models that are older than 50 or 60, in all kinds of ads. Like, they're trying to be more inclusive and to really represent everyone. When I go to the US, I only see images of essentially teenagers or women in their 20s. The airbrushing to me is out of control in the US. There's almost like a plastic look. They get rid of every single skin pore.
Totally.
And it's not really done here in Europe. Like, it's not really done in France or in Italy. There's more of a natural look, and that's seen as really not authentic. It looks really fake and kind of like a turnoff, I think, for Europeans. But I think it's very, very, very intense in the US, for sure.
I believe so. And
at the same time, I feel like there've been more bodies, like in body shapes and sizes, that are increasingly represented in ad campaigns in the US. So there's progress in terms of inclusion for body size, but for the aging bit, I think that it's unattainable.
Oh, there's so much work still to do, really. And also what I have beef with is that most of the eating disorder documentaries out there, they only represent the teenage, white, anorexic type of eating disorder. Almost none of them represent women like you and me, like someone in a bigger body, someone older, maybe a male, maybe someone, how eating disorders morph. And that really cements the idea that you only have an eating disorder when you are anorexic looking And,
Right.
that this kind of, you outgrow that when you're over 25 or something. And it's not
Exactly.
true. Women are stuck and they feel not represented. And me, forever, I thought, well, I can't possibly have an eating disorder because then I would look different. And by the way, I was older already, so there was nothing. That's why I never went to treatment either, because first of all, I thought I'm not sick enough. Second of all, I thought, well, I don't want to eat dinner with 10, 17-year-old anorexics. I was just, the lack of representation there as well contributes to the upholding of the issue.
And it really affects everyone. I mean, I'm thinking even pregnant women.
Yes,
and I think that mothers as well, and the way that our culture talks about eating disorders is so limited. They very rarely talk about people that exercise like obsessively, and so there's only
that would be an idea for another documentary.
Absolutely.
Right?
There's so much to talk about.
There's so much.
I could be doing this until the end of my days. I could do this until I'm 100, and I will never run out of topics to discuss because
Do you have any goals on the horizon in terms of movies or documentaries?
Yes. So I am about to launch a platform that's called The Realists. So it's like the opposite of the Illusionists.
Mm-hmm.
And I want my next project to have an element of community where I encourage people to all do experiences together and experiments together. So a different challenge every month, but also have an element of positivity. I think that to get people to wake up and to change their behaviors, they need to be inspired and motivated.
And not feel alone.
Exactly. And also feel hopeful. So for whatever I do in the future, I want to instill a sense of hope and joy in people and say, okay, we have discussed the problem, but here is what we can all do together to fight against it.
Yeah.
And so in The Realist, I'm not just going to talk about body image, but I'm also going to address the way that technology and social media platforms are taking over our lives and taking a lot of our time, and things that we can do in reaction to that, kind of like making us more mindful of how we spend our time online, and strategies to cope, to be less anxious and less stressed out. So that's going to be part of it.
I love it already.
Thank
I totally
you.
do. I wanted to ask you, you are on tour with the Illusionists. You're showing it at some big companies and schools and universities, and you have presented it also to some of the biggest companies in Silicon Valley, like Apple, Facebook, Google, Twitter. And I really want to know, what was the reaction from the men in Silicon Valley? Those who are, I don't know, this is maybe my preconception of a man in Silicon Valley who just wants to have beautiful women and a lot of money and not a care in the world. So how did they react?
It was interesting. I feel that, first of all, the audience for most of the screenings that I did at Apple, Facebook, Twitter, Google, it was an 80% female audience. So the men were a minority. I got the feeling that they didn't feel really affected by the issues. Of course, they had wonderful things to say about the film, but they were more impressed by the fact that I did everything on the movie, because it's very rare to get somebody to do the filming and the editing and the motion graphics. So they were really drawn to that idea, but they didn't really respond so much about the topic.
Or they didn't let on, maybe.
Maybe.
Because that's not the environment where they could, drop their masks and say, yeah, I am affected by this as well, you know.
Exactly. And they were amongst their colleagues and friends. So it might have been awkward to open up in the ways that people open up when I do showings for nonprofits or for schools. Like, it can get really vulnerable and very open.
And that's where the change happens. Oh.
Yes.
Yeah, it's so sad. Yeah, I thought that maybe in a totally performance-centric environment like Silicon Valley, it doesn't really surprise me that they were also, you know, giving you feedback on your performance instead of the content. So.
But also, like, I think that it's because if you look at the Bay Area, I think that men, compared to men that I see when I'm in Milan or in Paris, they don't really care about the way that they look. They're dressed, you know, with like baseball hat and T-shirts and sneakers. And for a European, it can look quite sloppy, but, you know, they're just focused so much on the work that they do that I feel like they don't really care about their exterior. So they might be one of the rare breeds of like people and like bubbles in the world where people are not really that concerned about their looks. Men in Silicon Valley, I think that they have other concerns.
Maybe. And what's the best endorsement that you got?
Well, I love the fact that I got feedback from Joss Whedon, who directed The Avengers and he created Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And it was so serendipitous. I went to an event by UN Women where it received a prize. And the people at UN Women LA, they allow me to put copies of my film in the gift baskets of Joss Whedon and a couple of other celebrities. And 2 weeks later, I was back in Europe. And I was going through my spam folder, which I do every once in a while, just to see if something ended up there by mistake. And I saw that there was an email with the title The Illusionists. And I clicked on it and I almost fainted. And it was an email from him saying that he had watched The Illusionists and he really loved it. And he especially liked the part about Japan and about the, you know, virtual woman that didn't exist. And I honestly, Merit, like I had like palpitations, like heart palpitations, for like 2 hours after seeing the email because it was so unexpected. So the lesson there is like always look into your spam folder. You never know what you will find. But he basically said that he gave me an endorsement afterwards and a quote that I was able to use. And he said that he believes that the Illusionists should be in every school and possibly every home. And it felt amazing to get that from somebody like him who's been such an incredible advocate for women.
Yeah. There are some books and some documentaries that I really, really would love to have everyone see and read because they're really important and they could spare someone from going down a very dark rabbit hole maybe for years.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a call to action at the end of the movie. So I want to ask you, what do you wish that people take away from the film?
So the number one thing that I think that I want people to take away from it is that you really vote with your wallet. So every time that you buy a product, you're almost like voting, you know, every time that you're at the supermarket or in a department store. And I would say to people that put your money where your values are.
Mm-hmm. And be mindful of the companies behind the product.
Exactly. Yeah. But also like something else, you know, that I feel like really passionate about like discussing is the fact that, you know, like we're all so focused on the ways that our bodies look and it's never good enough. But another takeaway for me is just like to be grateful for like all the wonderful things that your body can do. Like, because we often take it for granted.
Right.
But just like walk outside and, you know, go on a bike ride.
Hug people.
Hug people. Kiss your loved ones. And all of that.
It's true. We forget it. Thanks for the reminder.
And the senses as well. Like, I'm super big now in aromatherapy, and I just love that. Like, I know that when I'm having a moment where I'm stressed out for work, I put lavender essential oil on my pillow and on my wrists, and I immediately feel better. So I think that's like really, really important to just like be mindful of all of our senses and like all the wonderful things that our bodies allows us to do.
Oh, what a wonderful message. Could you tell my audience where they can find you if they want to find out about your work?
Of course. So the website for The Illusionists is theillusionists.org. And you can see the trailer, and you can actually rent or buy the movie directly from the website. And then my personal website is elenarossini.com. And there are videos there for other projects that I did. I always try to do projects that are, you know, about women or girls' empowerment. So maybe your audience will be interested in seeing something that I did for a company called Lottie. They have dolls that are kind of like the anti-Barbie, that are really based on real girls, and that are all like encouraging girls to be curious and get interested in all kinds of different activities. So it's all about what you can do, not about what they look like. And I did one about a doll that was inspired by a 6-year-old girl in Canada who loves astronomy. It ended up being the first doll that went up to the International Space Station. I made a little documentary about that.
Wonderful. What would you like to be remembered for? And let's hope that you will keep doing this for another 50 years, please.
Yes. Well, I would like to be remembered for creating media that inspires and that empowers women and girls. And I would also want to be remembered for maybe somebody that, creates joy and an alternative way of living.
Thank you so much. This has been wonderful.
Thank you so, so much for having me.
This was today's dose of badassery from Life Unrestricted. Find the show notes with links to everything we mentioned in this episode over at lifeunrestricted.org. And if this show is making you feel good, awesome, make sure to subscribe and please let others feel good too. By leaving a 5-star review on iTunes, you'll help make this show more visible and therefore more accessible for others. You're the best. Thanks.